All right, yeah, so I chose a bit of a fun title just so I can get people in the room. And I'm looking at what I'm saying is a negative space outside of DeFi, but it's to bring focus on applications that are outside of DeFi, like to consider who benefits and who builds, and what is the tooling we can look at to inform and encourage broader adoption, or building of products towards broader adoption. Yeah, that could be one. Yeah, so the goals of the talk is to sort of ideate around applications outside of DeFi. I'm going to try to avoid reading too much. But yeah, sort of who builds, who benefits, and what can companies readily build who are outside of Web3? How can they readily benefit from what Web3 brings? I am using Web3 a little broadly, so it's just decentralized technologies is maybe part of that. And then what tooling? Yeah, sorry, I already discussed that. So the format will be like a workshop. So I'll start off with some context about who I am and what else I do. We'll discuss a little bit around Web3 standards, specifically smart account standards and wallet standards, and how that has progressed over time. And what is the meaning, if any, to sort of Web2 people. And then we'll sort of make it a bit more interactive with exploring and communicating the Web3 benefits in Web2 terms. So that's just a bit of a challenge I give to myself, but also I'd like people to sort of try to think that way as well outside of DeFi, what else there is. So with a trailing bullet point, that's interesting. So how I got into Web3. So my background is in mechatronic engineering, and I studied that with computer science back over 20 years ago now. And I've been worked on embedded systems and then app development. And so with app development, it's about sort of moving fast, building innovative products that tend to target a specific, a consumer or a specific segment with the technology. So people will have smartphones, then people were just building a lot of apps on top of them to do things. And this is when that first came out, 2008. Or 2011, I think was when I was really into it. And so then I basically, the odd story is that through someone at choir, like a community choir I was in, mentioned Ethereum, and I didn't know what it was. And so thanks to that random cross-pollination, I found out about Ethereum and fell down the rabbit hole. So it wasn't through a tech group, it was literally just a hobby. And then I found this guy called Boki, found his workshops. Every week he was doing these Ethereum workshops. They were technical and are really, really cool. They've covered a lot of topics since, 2017 when they started. So this is just a few of them. Co-togethers I used to run. People would talk about specific topics. But I really liked the cadence of those workshops, and that there was this regularity of people getting together talking tech on Ethereum. I moved to London over a year ago, didn't find the same thing. I found a lot of networking events. There were weekly, like Monday, Tuesday, there were these weekly events that were on, and they felt more networking than technical. And so I then started these, and since then we're on workshop 49, so the next one will be our 50th workshop, which I do every week. Just outside of work, I just sort of hold space for technical conversations where we talk product and dev workshops. So there are 3 themes there. Yeah, I will at the end. There's a link to that. And I'll put it in Telegram, thanks. But to begin with, that's... So during the bear market, I'm still going every week. All the other ones are now less than weekly if they're still around. So, builders build during the bear market, and this is no exception to that. So, from that, what I'm always doing with my work in development and then in these conversations is to say, well, how do we get broader adoption? Like, we know it's cool, we know the tech's cool, but how can we convey that to a product person? But we do start with the primitives first, like some of the standards. And just to say, this is a bit of an open format, so it will be a bit conversational. And so if someone does ask something, I'll try to repeat it in the mic for the recording. So prepare to participate. Feel free to ask questions and answer questions if they come up with your peers. So just to warm up, what is an EIP versus an ERC? Who's familiar with, like, quick one-liner, ERC versus EIP? Yep, I'm just going to run around. Oh, what was that?
It's consensus or not.
Whether it's consensus or not? Well, does anyone else have another answer? Well, actually, the difference I've understood, now I'm going to question myself, is that an EIP is more around the, EIP stands for Ethereum Improvement Proposal, ERC is Ethereum Request for Comment, but I think the de facto way they're being used is that EIP ends up being a protocol change or not, and an ERC is generally at the smart contract layer. So we'll dig into a few of those. So let's start with EOAs. It looks something like this. It's a very simple diagram, but you have this signed message, like generally an ECDSA signature, and that's at the protocol level. You submit a signed transaction or a message into a mempool. The nodes pick that up and process your transaction. Some standards around that, these were a couple of standards outside 2018, but the first part is just like the wallet API is around Ethereum signed message, and having the output of that is the to verify that the EOA has signed that message and is doing that transaction. You've got 712. Who's sort of familiar with where 712 has been used, or 1271 specifically? So the 712 is around structured type data, and having a standard for how that's structured. 1271 is around having smart contracts being able to verify data. So if it's an EOA, you sign a message off-chain, someone else can verify that off-chain. With a smart contract, there isn't a private key there, so you can't exactly have a smart contract sign something. So what you have to do there is implement this standard function to say, if I receive a signed message, does this smart contract say that that is valid according to it? So if it's a smart contract account or a smart contract wallet, as it was previously called, that's a way of it signaling that it has approved this signed message. So these are just a couple of small technical things that have been around since 2018, or at least the standards were proposed then, but adoption has been a bit, I guess, delayed. There is a newer push towards that now, but where have these been adopted? Does anyone have specific examples they know? Some examples of where either of these have been used?
Or gasless transactions.
Yep, exactly. Meta transactions or gasless transactions. Yep, that's a good one. That's the main one. Okay, we'll continue then. Some other standards more recently. ERC 4337 has gained a lot of attention because it basically brought a lot of wallet developers and others building and wanting smart contract accounts to be singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. So 4337 has been a standard of that. I did want to refer to Yoav, who's I think outside, but he can see in the recording my question for him. And then 6900 is another standard around modular, what do you call it? Modular smart contract accounts and plugins is the title. And so, that's also around starting from 4337, but I think 6900 will be outside of that. So just referring to you. So 4337 is one of those standards. So when we look at these newer standards and we see what it's trying to achieve, it's like, no presentation will be complete without a meme, but this thing, it's like a smart contract wallet. We've seen it before. It's like, is this account abstraction? But again, the great thing that 4337 did was brought everyone together to be talking around the same thing rather than implementing their own. Like Safe had their smart contract wallets in the past, but that did something specific. This is more generic. So smart accounts and on-chain account abstraction. So this is, you have the verification logic of someone's account that is at the smart contract layer, not at the protocol layer. So before, when we saw the diagram, it was a signature that goes to a mempool that is that's at the protocol layer. Here it's a smart contract layer. So it's just effectively becomes another layer. It's a simplification of this. So you have a user operation rather than a regular message. So a user operation is a structure that is signed by, or it is, validated with some mechanism. It could be a signature like an ECDSA key. It could be some other scheme. It could be a zero-knowledge proof. Some means of saying that this smart account has authorized this user operation. And how it's executed is also subject to the wallet. So there's some more flexibility in that. It also has a mempool, and instead of, say, miners or whatever, it has bundlers. And those bundlers will effectively submit a transaction containing many signed user operations to the blockchain. That could be a layer 1, but pragmatically, it's probably going to be a lot of layer 2s, I think. We'll do this. But like the beginning, the smart contract wallets, as they were called earlier, or smart accounts today, there is a little bit of a barrier to their deployment. Can anyone suggest what that barrier might be for a business or for a team?
Yes.
Yep. Any others?
Very simple one that's key management.
Yep.
Businesses just don't have key management.
Yeah. So those two reasons, just yeah. Yeah. So for the recording, that was we had gas, which I guess translates to cost, and we also had complexity, which doubles up, key management, which touches on, so what I try to do is sort of abstract a little bit to say there are these specific things we articulate, but really when a non-Web3 person looks at it, it's going to look like complexity and look like cost. That's effectively what we're dealing with. So this really was a problem to its deployment. But to explain maybe a little detail of maybe another question to the audience, what problem does 4337 seek to solve? Anyone? Maybe I'll pass the mic. In a summary?
Well, well, as the author of 4337, it seeks to solve account abstraction in a decentralized way. We had smart accounts before for many years. The problem is that in order to access them, you need to also keep an EOA with a key, which means that which negates the value of account abstraction. Otherwise, you have no way to transact. So in order to solve this problem, other protocols needed to, other smart accounts just kept centralized relays where the relay would send a transaction, the transaction on your behalf, which means that they can also censor you and it becomes a centralized solution. So 4337 is a decentralization solution for that.
Cool, thanks, Yoav. Cheers, round of applause. Oh, did you want to add something?
Yeah, can I ask a question though?
Yeah, go for it.
Or afterwards?
No question now.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so since it's native, I just wanted to know what are the trade-offs that you can currently see when it comes to just operate that way? That's basically it.
Okay. Well, we might save that one for after, actually. Maybe, you can ask Yoav directly after. But, good question. No, thank you, Yoav. And so that's what that solves. And again, that's a complexity we can appreciate or begin to appreciate by, digging more into this and understanding it and saying, oh yeah, that is a problem. This is a great solution. And then all wallets can agree to build upon this. But again, there's just some both complexity and costs involved in non-Web3 people considering this investment upfront. So for each user, they'll have to deploy a smart contract. So that comes with a cost. So there are some things that can mitigate this cost or defer the payment of deployment in different ways. So with the 1271, sorry if that's a bit small, with 1271 contract signature validation, there is ERC 6492, which is the means of sort of being able to verify that a smart contract will approve a signed message without needing to deploy the contract first. So I can sign something off-chain and say this is valid for my smart account, which may not be deployed yet. And then I can say, here, you can verify this, that my account that will be here will authorize this, will find this valid, and you can check that, again, with a static call or something like that, that needed to pay to deploy the contract on-chain right away. And same with 4337, you have a means of, because if you ask every user to sign up, and this was Arjun's problem, I believe, at the peak kind of bull run, you tell someone, here's your smart contract wallet, it's got guardians, it's the best thing, just spend $50 in gas to deploy it. You can't get a new user that way. You can't ask them to spend $50 for a tool that they don't know what it's going to be good for necessarily, unless they've really done the homework themselves and then realize the benefit. But even then, it's still $50 to what was a new thing. Similarly with smart accounts, if there's a way of deferring the cost of deployment to the user's first action, that's very pragmatic. So with app permissions is another paradigm I find useful for this. When you ask a user to, I'm an app and I want to have access to your contacts, you can't just pop that at the beginning anymore. In the early days of app development, that was okay, where you could just do that. But now it's, you really have to be polite about showing the benefit of why the contacts will help and then request permission to access the contacts then. Similarly for deployment, I just feel it's something you need to really gain the user's momentum, if you will, or motivation first, before prompting them to say, hey, you're going to have to spend to deploy this, or have a means for the dApp itself to absorb that cost for the user. So I'm sort of trying to get us to think from the point of view of a, I guess as a business, you know, a Web2 company, to say, well, how are they going to look at this? They're just going to see costs and complexity and maybe struggle to see the benefits. So let's look at, yeah, the modular verification piece. We spoke about ECDSA signatures, which is what's used at the protocol level, but we can unlock, that's not really so big. So it's, yeah, one of the things we can do is use BLS signatures. This is something we've integrated in the past project, but now again in Wax. So this is wax.psc.dev is the project I'm working on within the Ethereum Foundation. The passkey validation is another piece that's come from, I think Ledger did an implementation, so we've integrated that into a 4337 account. We've got a prototype of using recovery. So that's just using ECDSA, but you could do recovery with other mechanisms, like any other mechanism. So we go further down, we look at the last one is email validation. So there's a team that's called ZK Email that has worked on the ability to generate a proof that you've received certain information in an email, and that proof can be used to authorize transactions. So that's a perfect one for recovery. Risky depending on how well you manage your email, but you can protect it with time delays. So there's these things you can do to make it more accessible with things like more general purpose validation mechanisms. So I'm just going to have to keep sipping my water. But yeah, that's within the PSC. Yeah, so within the Privacy and Scaling Explorations group in EF, there's a lot of little projects, and V was talking about her project before, or the project she's in. This is wallet account experiments. I specifically chose it so it says Wax, but smart account experiments may be a more correct term, but saxophone is not as you know. So yeah, that's sort of what we're doing. But again, I like to sort of try to take a step up and then try surface the capabilities in a non-Web3 language. So this is the challenge here. Yeah, so what does Web3 bring to non-Web3 entrepreneurs and product people? And we'll go into one example. But generally it has to be an efficiency gain. Like for them to bother to look at it, it has to provide them with something. So it's always somewhat transactional for a business to say, look at this new complex tech, here's why it's worth your while. It either is going to give you some efficiency, maybe a cost reduction, cost savings, a competitive advantage. Maybe it opens up a new market. So something like that would at least get your foot in the door and have them actually listen to what Web3 has to offer. It could be around a new market. It could be about user retention. So there could be some argument that by having users having their own self-sovereign thing that you connect with, it's got maybe stronger user retention, but and yeah, cost offset. So yeah, any investment that the company does has to be offset by the benefits they're going to get, and then some. So they have to really, make it worth their while. So let's look at decentralized storage. Like an IPFS guy at the front. And yeah, how could we sort of communicate that as a benefit for a business? And I'm not sure if I discussed it with someone last night, but it could be seen as self-sovereign storage outside of Amazon. So I'm trying to just find other ways, and if anyone's got other ideas of how you might frame, say, decentralized storage in general. Do we have another mic to go around? Is there a second microphone? Oh, down here. Yeah, we'll just pass it down the back. Is that all right? Just at the back behind. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just some quick points on the previous one that you've mentioned, coming from, not from technical background, but more from product. Our project is now bridging the Web 2 travel into Web 3 on a quite big scale, and we have a lot of conversations on what's going on the business side. And one of the things that people from real businesses who run businesses every day and care about the revenue, they need to know that if they plug into this Web 3 thing, the Web 2 continues to work.
Yeah.
That's one of the things going beyond the ones that you've mentioned about the retention, the revenue, because they want to try the system first to see if it's valid. And then the second one is, of course, the who is going to create and work and build for them.
Exactly.
So these
Yeah,
are
really good
things
points.
that's I would highlight because this comes from practice.
Yeah, that's really good. So this is, yeah, you can hang on to the mic there, we'll pass it around. But yeah, that's sort of validation for this conversation that I feel wouldn't hurt for us to be more exposed to know what our Web2 business is asking. And it sounds like if they're running their business from the Web2 technology they have, of course they don't want to just drop it and then pick up everything on Web3. The progressive decentralization model has been discussed a lot, and I definitely like, and I think it's actually my end point around what would be a capability that you bring into an existing Web2 business. So it's not to say that they are going to replace everything they do, but it's just to say, look, you're doing something already. How can this supplement your offering? How can it augment what you're doing, give you a competitive advantage or whatever? Yeah, no, really good points. So say smart contracts, and I think a couple of us mentioned this at lunch, that it could be called like delayed actions because you can program that. Like just tell someone, hey, it's a smart contract, you can do anything. It's too fuzzy, it's too vague. We need sort of concrete things to tell people. And escrow is obviously an easy one that people refer to. Yeah, peer-to-peer money time agreements is another one. How am I for time? Got another half hour? Was it? I thought it was 55 minutes on the thing. We're going to skip really quickly through this next session. No, you're good, you're good. If I got to wrap up soon, I can do that. And we'll continue the conversation after. So yeah, this is just, let's just call this seeding your mind for this conversation and then have this conversation with whomever you want out there. So this is like permission to talk Web 2 capabilities with a Web 3 mindset. Anyway. Okay, we do. Okay, when you were looking up at me, I'm like, that's cool, that's cool. Thank you. Yeah. Nah. Okay, so yeah, let's cool down again. I'm not rushing anymore. So, do I have that up there? What have I got? It's showing there. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so maybe, are there any, now I can chill a bit. So what other examples with smart contracts might people think about? Like what's something we could say that a smart contract brings in a concrete example for someone? I mean, apart from tokens or something like, I think, yep. We'll bring the mic back here. Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Globally visible proof of agreement.
Nice. Yep. So that's having like a, yeah, normally for something like escrow, as I understand it, you have like a trusted third party. And that's often the way I explain Web3 to people is to say, look, in lieu of a trusted third party, we can have this thing that's verifiable, that's independent of any single entity. And what was the one you just said? Sorry, it was the, I'll just repeat it here. So
globally visible proof of agreement.
Yeah, globally visible proof of agreement.
So, if you and I say to our customers, we've just agreed a deal for $20 million over 6 weeks,
yep.
And it will be made at 30 grand a day as a payment, we can point to the smart contract and show the funds which are locked in the smart contract. We can show the payment schedule,
yep.
And everybody understands that money is going to move over the next X weeks. This much will be paid every day, and there's the proof, and nobody can change it.
Yeah, and if I miss something, that's recorded to say that the money didn't move from me to the next payment.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's a good one. So it's something that's an auditable, verifiable record that is independent of any one thing. You don't depend on Amazon for that. You don't depend on someone providing a service that you've got to pay and risk database loss or anything like that. Of course, there's a lot of redundancies, but yeah, doing it in a decentralized way has its benefits. Does anyone else had any other thoughts of examples?
Sometimes proof of ownership.
Like
for
there
instance,
you go. Yeah.
For instance, NFTs and that kind of stuff can not only be used for JPEGs, which is nice, but can also be used for like proving that you are the owner of a real life asset, like a house or something like that.
Yeah, so that's a common example is the ownership one. So starting from owning ethers to owning a token, the ownership example is a very common one, like the way it started with ERC20, 721 now. That's something it was a talk that kind of from OX Park that stood out to me. It was just one of their evening events where they said the token model is still about ownership. It's not about, say, gaming or interaction. It is just about the ownerships. But definitely that's a strong case. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like ENS has had pretty strong pull from smart contracts just as a way to assert mutability without delegating out to an entity that you may not control.
Yeah.
Right. So it's less self-sovereign than just a public key, but it has better longevity than just a public key.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. So that's another attribute I think I have on the next slide. Do I have it on the next one? No, let's start there. But yeah, there is that idea of longevity outside of the company. So that's something I like to think of as well, to say, doesn't mean anything for a particular business to say, hey, your customers can have a piece of what your product is. Gaming's an easier example to think of, and ownership in that case. To say, your game created an asset for this person. Now that asset exists outside of the game. Is that a plus? So I'm losing my voice. Yeah, so is that a plus for them that they can have it outside of the company? Because for some businesses, they might say, well, actually, why would I allow my users, like a lot of companies today like the walled garden approach, that they want to keep their customers. They want to say anything you get from within this app stays within this app. So it's a difficult sell to tell them why having an asset outside of their servers is a plus. But I think that's something that can be won with framing of maybe interoperability to say, this token that you created will be recognized. It's verifiable on chain that it started here, but now you've got a lot of fan games using your axe for other reasons. There's some examples there. Don't know if anyone wants to tease that out anymore.
I mean, there are some trade-offs where when you, I guess, choose to engage in like a more homogenized space, right? It's supposed to be better for users because they'll be able to have more choices. And the same can be true for businesses. If you believe that your business is better than what else is out there, then you should be winning, right?
That's an interesting.
And so it's sort of like hide in your walled garden is to say like you don't believe that you can win.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a.
I think that's a good point to lean into. That if you're so confident of your offering, you could open source it and know you're going to deliver it the best. I mean, that's open source, but you could say, look, we know we're delivering a superior product and that assets are created here. If someone were to do a clone and use that asset in their own game, it wouldn't compete with ours. Like that's quite a confident stance for a company to be in. But I guess where it might be difficult is in a new domain for a company. So if a company is established in what they do, they're used to protecting, it's just hard to change that. So yeah, anyways, just to think of, and again, carry this for conversations after, like how to communicate to people that there's a benefit here with opening up a little bit.
So one way I look at it is similar to reserve currencies. I mean, does the US gain or lose from the dollar being used as the world reserve currency? Let's say it was only accepted in the US, and the US would not honor any obligations that happen outside the US. So there would be a different reserve currency in the world. It just wouldn't, and the US would lose this power. So I think a company that issues something that becomes very popular due to its own platform, and then it's used by other platforms, it makes them more powerful, not less.
Yep, and that's a really good analogy then to say, as a business, maybe try not to think of assets within the company and exclusive lock-ins. Think of building the best ecosystem thing. And again, I can just see it from both sides. I know that's a hard sell for some businesses.
This maybe is more on the privacy side of things in blockchain, but there are a lot of areas where parties can have a lot of mutual benefit of sharing information, but without really sharing it, right? Maybe because they can't from a regulatory perspective, or because they don't want to from a business perspective.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, so I said there, like this is touching towards the second part of your point there, that it's easier compliance with data privacy because you don't necessarily need to store everyone's personally identifiable information.
Like healthcare, I mean,
health is a good one. So I think, yeah, this is an example. Oh, I'm really losing my voice. It's an example I think about a lot to say consumers are so used to giving their data away, right? We just expect that we're going to use a service for free. We complain if it's not free, yet we kind of have become like okay with giving away a lot of valuable data. I think the moment data is sort of monetized back to the user, where if I had a service, so again, thinking just as a product point of view, if me as a consumer could submit like an obfuscation of my data. Let's not call it hashing. Let's not call it. Just say an obfuscation of my data, and I can get money for that obfuscation because it's verifiable, like with zero knowledge proofs and whatnot under the hood. Awesome. I think that's going to pull people in to say, what, you just gave them your previous heart rate history for the last month and you got this much money. And then if you give, I've got a year's worth, of course I'm going to sell it. Like, it's just an immediate, like, I think that's will create market pull from consumers for something like that. But again, it's the accuracy of it that it might be a bit difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think from thinking about it from the consumer perspective, it's right. But also, just from the business perspective, there are a lot of places where companies sharing cybersecurity information, right? Like, they wouldn't want to share it because there are a lot of reasons why they wouldn't want to share it, but they want to have the benefit of having this shared pool of data that everyone can benefit from.
That's a good one. And in a sense, you ask which part of, I might ask which part of Web3 that is.
I'm saying that's more, I think, maybe on the privacy area, like it's like maybe a more newly explored part of Web3, but I think...
and that's why I do bucket Web3 to include stuff like that, because it brings our attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, this gets into all the concepts around differential privacy. You know, so, you know, there's a whole bunch of work on things like translucent databases, where you can get things like the average statistics are accurate, but every single data point has been randomized a little. You know, you could cluster, you could do statistically accurate cluster analysis, but no single piece of identifiable information hasn't been screwed with. Everybody's house has been moved 200 meters in a random direction, you can't identify anybody. And all this stuff goes back, you know, 20 years ago, something like that. Yeah. So the idea that you could take these kind of primitives, put them into Web3 and then build them into ecosystems is there. But I also thought the promise of Web3 was that we would make people pay for things again so that they were in charge.
Yep.
And the idea that we're going to use differential privacy type technology, snarks, as a way of maintaining surveillance capitalism, but now it's surveillance capitalism with the privacy layer, like, I'm not sure that gets us the world that we want. Specifically because we don't know what progress will be made further down the line in breaking that privacy.
Yeah.
So if the data never left your computer, you have a very strong reason to believe that in future that data will not be more widely available.
Yep.
But if the data has ever left your machine, the average lifespan of a cryptographic algorithm is only 20 years.
Oh.
Right? You know,
even the quantum-proof ones that are coming,
I mean, we can't talk about the future.
Yeah.
But in the past, algorithms have about a 20-year lifespan.
Interesting. Yeah.
So if we continue to have a 20-year lifespan, you got to say, okay, what data about your life from the year 2000 is potentially damaging today?
Yeah.
And that's everything you put on the internet in high school.
Yeah.
So
I think that's,
you know, I just want to raise this thing of like, if we want the blockchain to be about privacy, actually getting people to pay for services with money rather than for data is one of the first ways of getting that privacy.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, I think just to give a little fun fact about when I was in uni doing mechatronics, what I learned about GPS was that it wouldn't return your accurate coordinates immediately. I forget what it was called, it was a long time ago, but it would give you a randomized coordinate within a certain radius of where you actually were. So the satellite knew where you were, but it would only give you whatever time period, a point that was like within 100 meters of where you were. Obviously, over time, you could just sit there and average it out. If you didn't move for that duration, you'd then get a more accurate understanding of where you were. But yeah, but that was one way that was done.
Yeah, I think that's why I maybe went more into the actual. I mean, we may be diving too deep into like the privacy side of things, but I think I totally agree with you, by the way, and I think that running computation over encrypted data, where you run the computation of your encrypted data, but you don't submit it to the blockchain, right? And you pay for it. That's like the way to think about blockchain privacy. And then also the model that runs the computation isn't owned by anyone, right? It's owned by the blockchain. So I think that's kind of where I was going to with this.
Excellent. No, thanks. And yeah, so just to, I know we're getting closer to time, and just to cover a few things at the end. So yeah, I sort of frame it as like, you know, build bridges across less complex divides, meaning like a lot of us will be looking inside the tech and looking specifically what we're building, which we should be, but it's often refreshing to sort of look upwards and say, okay, well, who's using this and where? Like, how do we more readily bring this to people? And does it hurt to be somewhat opinionated in the SDKs we create. So that's something I'm exploring within Wax to say, look, would it make sense to create a high-level SDK that speaks in sort of Web 2 terms to say create account, reset password, and just that terminology might be there. And under the hood, it could be Web 3. But, maybe pros and cons for that. I don't know if anyone's got thoughts on that, but...
I think, first of all, I would invite everyone here to come to my talk tomorrow because I'm talking about some of those things as well, what we're building.
Will do.
I think Web3 has to be boring, and until it will become boring, it will never be, adopted in a general, that won't happen. So, under the hood, it can have whatever cool tech that everyone is super excited about in these types of conferences, but it should be boring
another way to phrase it is like cognitive on-ramps. Like we've got to really make it easy at first and then bring people up to where the complexity we talk about. So to enable non-Web3 natives to immediately grok the benefits. Like what would be an elevator pitch for, say, some specific capability that we're talking about in Web3, quote, including privacy and these things. How this is just a thought exercise. Like, how would you communicate to a cafe owner the benefit of a token? Like, you could relate it to like a rewards card, like a coffee rewards card. You say, actually, it's like a reward card that the customers who get a coffee from you can actually get a coffee from others in your neighborhood as well, and somehow say that's a benefit. Like, there's some interesting things you could try play with. Say it's a way you can verify a token that exists outside of just one coffee store. Yeah, Vinny?
Well, so... on this, right, there's a thing called the Norwegian rule, right? And the Norwegian rule is that everything which is fun is either fattening or immoral, right? And so most of the Web3 use cases that are potentially really useful in the real world are simply illegal. I open a cafe, I pre-sell 3 years worth of coffee tokens, people buy the coffee tokens at a 20% discount, they cash them in, and my cost of servicing the coffee token is my wholesale cost. Their benefit from getting the coffee token is the retail cost. So my cost of capital is a third of what it would be if I borrowed from a bank. Right? Customer wins, I win, bank loses, everything's great.
But
it's
technically
fantastic. $250,000 worth of legal costs to get that to work. So,
interesting.
So this notion that we are in a position where the most interesting use cases are the ones which are in the most heavily regulated areas shouldn't surprise us, right? People have been talking about the great blockchain Uber revolution for years. Oh, all that Uber really does is, matching drivers. No, most of what Uber does is it deals with assholes, right? And the
dispute resolution.
Dispute resolution, large big data models for trying to pick out, drivers that are likely to be bad drivers, market manipulation, outright bribery in some markets. Right. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they've done to get the regulatory exceptions to get it through. And, I guess the thing that I want to drive at here is we kind of have to decide whether we're going through that stuff with a bulldozer, which is where all the network state stuff comes in. You just set up jurisdictions where you can do blockchain Uber, you can do blockchain fundraising, you run new land under new law, and you do it in special economic zones, which was the conference that came from in Amsterdam. Or we look for edge cases where we have markets which just totally don't exist and don't work, and we try and set up new stuff there, and that is essentially the NFT markets. But I kind of feel like we're in a bit of a crisis condition because both of those doors seem to be very hard to get through right now. New property has mostly turned out to be worthless. Everybody that bought NFTs in virtual real estate has lost their shirt. And at the same time, we're making slower progress than hoped on getting the necessary financial regulation stuff through to do this stuff in the real world. And that leaves the network states, which I think are going to take 10 years before they get anywhere. So I'm kind of, I have a feeling that if we're asking where's the magic, we kind of have those three categories to work with, and I don't know which door to force.
And I think, I think experimentation will be part of that, like discovery. That if it is an existing business, you've got some Web 2 entrepreneur who's already got their startup, they've already got their business, they're doing something, solving some problem, but then we just want to augment and complement their offering. We want to let them add another piece to it, and hopefully if they've already got some appropriate legal things in place, that they will just, shoehorn it in, put it in correctly into what they're already familiar with. And so that's maybe the other way. I'll just skip along to this. Yeah, so there may be I think I mentioned this before, that there's obviously the ideal we'll look towards to sort of be like purely decentralized and everything's, fully decentralized to the nth degree, and that's what everyone should do. That's obviously maybe not realistic to begin with, except if you're serving the Web3 community. And so the opinionated, semi-trusted components, just a way of perhaps being a pragmatic stepping stone. I just found it interesting when, I forgot his name now, had mentioned how he got the venue. It was coincidentally through someone who knew him from the previous venue with DCxPrague, where they ran that. And it just makes us think that in this sort of trustless space, we really still rely heavily on trusted relationships and history. So again, going back to maybe the verifiable on-chain proofs of things, like I think there is something to be said around just attesting to the past. So attestations, I think, are really, really important. So that's there. So I just consider that a bit of food for thought. And feel free to continue these conversations. I think there's 15 minutes left of this talk. But there on the left is the workshops that I do outside of work. And that's what I do at most of my work. So yeah, thanks everyone. But yeah, given we have some time, any concluding comments or talks? Oh, we'll get the photo there or a scan. This is the weekly workshops if you want to grab that. They're based in London, but I do... Oh, perfect. Yeah, but we do dial people in. So it's it's an events page. It's got a lot of events, and the 50th I hope to make it a little bit bigger. So I might have to do like 49.1, 49.2 before I plan the 50th. So we'll make the 50th a big one. Any other thoughts and questions? We'll pass the mic along, please. Thank you. Cool.
First of all, thank you very much for this conversation and different points of view. I just wanted to say that, like you mentioned, like these three angles that we should be looking at, and you see it as like we're stuck a bit, like where to go. I come from, as I mentioned, from the travel Web 2, Web 3 space, where we have like 160 different brands already like looking at Web 3 connectivity, because they look like how to connect between themselves, because travel is super fragmented and there are a lot of intermediaries, right? And they deal with tokens, right? You have your QR code on your phone. This is like a digital asset, right? So like it's digital, super global, but super fragmented. There are like companies like Hotel Plan might have around 100 APIs to run. One API can be 30,000 euros per year. So like you can calculate how much money is spent just like, to send data, get data. So what we are doing right now, like we build this, like I'm not going to shield or name the names, like if you are interested, like you can ask, but like we build the connectivity between the travel partners. This is a consortium. And what they have now, they have connectivity. And now we are building the messenger, so the companies can peer-to-peer connect to each other and send the data. Exactly what you've mentioned about like not shielding the data of companies to others, but between ourselves, because we agree that we know each other, we are compliant, and so on and so forth. So that's the way we tackle this Web 2, Web 3 shift in our, so to say, community, like Web 3, Web 2 travel. So that's a very important conversation, and I just like want to thank you very much, and I will forward the QR codes to our devs.
Oh, excellent, thank you. Yeah, any other follow-ups? Concluding thoughts?
I'm always up for causing trouble. Right? So, this question of what does the next economy look like, right? Ethereum has always had the story of like building the next economy. And what we've discovered is that for the most part, the next economy looks like fraud, right?
The last economy as
Well,
well.
maybe, right? But probably 90, 95%, 99% of the transactions done on Ethereum since 2015 have been fraud, right? And that should horrify us, right? So when we start looking at these kind of technologies and we say, how do we get this stuff into the real world? The core promise that Ethereum made was fraud-free, right? 2015, if you look at all the marketing, all the PR, all the propaganda, a fair amount of which I wrote, everything is about trustless, meaning you can do the transaction, you don't have to trust the counterparty. No, you do the transaction, you can't trust the counterparty, which is what trustless has come to mean in practice. So I think that there is a root problem here, which is the brand guarantee of Ethereum should have been fraud proofing, not trustlessness, right? So then we come back to this adoption question, right? So what I think that people want from the wallet infrastructure is 100% hard proof of who they're transacting with, and if that person screws them, 100% accountability, right? Which suggests that we start looking at things like identity escrow. We look at people vouching, we look at ways of binding a key to a set of social proofs. Because I think that the missing ingredient here is not privacy, it's accountability.
That's good. Yeah. And I think just jumping back to the, get in front of the mic. Jumping back to the previous talk around, Sybil resistance and whatnot, there's ways of saying that this is a genuine person and they can provide a proof that they are within a certain group, but not have to reveal in the transaction who specifically they are. But it would be nice to then have also similar mechanisms for defense to say, actually, if a legitimate claim, there is some, let's say hypothetically, like the conversation we literally had at lunch, that there is a contract going between two people, perhaps different countries, and you want to have a trusted third party that has the mechanism to revoke or correct a mistake that was made or an error. So if someone tries to renege on a smart contract agreement that maybe isn't fully codified, there's just that gray area that allows an independent arbiter to tilt the scales one way and say, actually, this person who agreed to have, I'm not explaining it well, but basically you have, yeah, like if, yeah. So if there's, just to repeat for the recording, if there's like a rug pull that someone can actually suffer consequences for doing that, they're not just able to disappear, create a new account and wash the money away. So I think, not to talk too much political about SBF or anything, but, having certain people doing the wrong things, getting, reprimanded for it, whomever they may be, is a good thing for the industry because it kind of cleans it up a bit. But that's just maybe another stretch of conversation. I think we've got 10 minutes to go, so we may as well, or 8 minutes, so we'll just maybe wrap it up there and we'll feel free to talk amongst ourselves. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers.